But because of my activities and other people's activities, the weathermen had to spend a lot of time trying to determine who the informants were, who the police agents were, and this distracted them from their goals. And I have no doubt that there's a good number of people alive in this country today because of what myself and other people did.
The tools that most policemen use, the tools that the FBI uses, all of a sudden became suspect, attacked.
During the 1970s, John Ashbrook was one of the few members of Congress who fought for a strong internal defense against communism. This statement, given before our cameras in Washington, D.C., is taken from his last public interview before his sudden and unexpected death in 1982.
Again, the government is virtually stripped naked when it comes to this particular aspect. There is no loyalty program. I once, at a hearing, had the opportunity to interrogate the director of the program in the FBI supposedly having loyalty. I said, well, if you found a communist in the government now, what could you do? He said, well, you really can't do anything. Can't ask them questions. They don't keep records. They don't have a loyalty oath. The liberals in the last 15 or 20 years have virtually made government service open to communists by the destruction of the loyalty program and by making it impossible for the FBI or even the Civil Service Commission to make any checks. I would challenge anybody to say that the FBI or the Civil Service Commission could even investigate a communist if you knew one were working for the government. That's how far they've gone. That's how much we've failed.
If you think I'll cooperate with you in any way, you are insane.
Mr. Chairman, I move to abolish this committee and to seal its records so that no longer do we have to face the spectacle of innocent Americans being
And
terrorized.
furthermore, I say that no agency of this government has any business inquiring into a person's loyalty to the United States. That is McCarthyism and can only lead to the kind of witch hunt.
The purpose of this program has been to review the record of Soviet penetration into the United States government. The lesson of history is that nations fall to communism from the inside. The primary strategy for conquest has not been military invasion, but internal subversion. Yet, in spite of this reality, the United States has allowed all the layers that once existed as protection against internal subversion to be stripped away. First, the important investigative committees of both the House and the Senate were abolished. Then the Internal Security Division of the Justice Department was eliminated. The Subversive Activities Control Board was terminated by lack of funding. The Attorney General's list of subversive organizations is no longer published or even maintained. The counterintelligence units of the armed forces have been severely limited. The FBI has been forced to reduce its internal security activities by over 90%. State and municipal police agencies have all but abandoned their intelligence units. And the CIA has practically ceased to function as a defender of American interests around the world. Communists in our government? Well, to many Americans, the response is, so what, and who cares? What harm can they possibly do to a great and powerful nation as the United States? But recent history already has answered that question. It is the history of American paralysis in world conflict. Having fought a world war supposedly to protect Europe from Germany and to save China from Japan, at the end of that war, we gave the Soviets all of Eastern Europe, Manchuria, the Kuril Islands, the Chinese port of Dairen, the northern half of Korea, and half of Germany. In Yugoslavia, we guaranteed the success of communism by throwing our weight behind the Stalinist Tito in his fight against the pro-Western Mihailovich. After the war, in a project called Operation Keelhaul, we used American troops to round up anti-communist refugees all over Europe to be shipped back to Russia where they faced execution or slave labor in Siberia. This broke the back of the anti-communist movement in Europe. We supported the communist forces of Mao Zedong in their war against Chiang Kai-shek and actively worked behind the scenes to bring about the communization of China. We created the United Nations and staffed the Secretariat with communists from the State Department. We gave the Soviets 3 votes in the General Assembly compared to 1 for us, and agreed further that a Soviet national would always be in charge of UN military activities. We pushed Algeria into the communist orbit by supporting Venezuela. We helped Castro to power in Cuba and later betrayed the anti-Castro invasion force at the Bay of Pigs. In Korea and Vietnam, we denied our military forces the option of victory. We supported the Sandinista communists in the takeover of Nicaragua. We gave the Panama Canal to a pro-Soviet dictatorship. We have bankrupted ourselves with foreign aid to our most bitter enemies around the world. We have built Soviet industry and have given them high technology for their nuclear strike force. When they could not pay, we canceled their debts and passed them on to the American taxpayer. We condemn anti-communist regimes in Africa and Latin America, allegedly for violations of human rights. But we invite to the White House and then publicly embrace every communist dictator in the world, no matter how bloody his hands. And while freedom fighters throw themselves against Soviet tanks in Hungary, Afghanistan, and Poland, we give solemn assurances that we will not intervene, and then send economic aid to the very communist governments which the people themselves are attempting to topple. The hard reality is that communism would not be a major force today without the massive help received from the United States government, and that America's retreat from victory since World War II is the result not of a confusion factor, but of the subversion factor. In a speech before the Roman Senate in the 1st century BC, it was Cicero who said, "A nation can survive its fools and even the ambitious, but it cannot survive treason from within." Now, it's not popular today to use the word treason, because that implies what we all dread, a state of war. But the truth is, whether we like it or not, we are at war, and we do have enemies outside our gates and inside who are sworn to our destruction. This is a new kind of war we face. We can't pick up our rifles and rush off to a foreign land to engage in open combat. The battle this time is here, in America itself. And the enemy doesn't wear a uniform or speak a strange language. He is from our country's best families and most prestigious universities. He's not found behind barricades, but in business and science, in the media, the pulpit, the classroom, and in government itself.